The smirk was the final, defining gesture. It spread across Gerald's face as he leaned back, the words, "If you quit, I'll replace you by Friday," hanging in the air between us like a challenge. He thought I was bluffing. He thought procurement wasn't rocket science. I decided then to let him find out exactly what it was. I had spent 6 years building a career at a mid-sized manufacturing company in the Midwest. No flashy tech startups or artisanal coffee. Just a solid operation, 2 facilities, 300 employees, producing industrial parts for automotive suppliers. My title was procurement manager, but the reality of the role was far more intricate than an organizational chart suggested. I was the linchpin, handling every vendor relationship, every contract negotiation, safeguarding our supply chain from constant collapse. Raw materials, packaging, specialized tools, critical parts, if we needed it, I made it happen. The complexity lay in the details, in the human element. My network encompassed 47 different suppliers spread across a dozen states and 3 countries. Each one came with its own set of idiosyncrasies, lead times, quality benchmarks, and pricing structures. Some were monolithic corporations with rigid protocols, others, family-owned businesses where a handshake carried real weight. My job was to understand these nuances. I knew who to call when an order was needed yesterday, who would work with us on payment terms when cash flow tightened, and which suppliers would prioritize our needs during shortages versus those who would vanish at the whisper of a larger customer. I started as a junior buyer, learning the ropes, building trust, distinguishing reliable partners from those who'd ghost us when prices fluctuated. By my 3rd year, I was at the helm of the department, supported only by 2 assistants whose primary tasks were data entry and phone calls. My early years were a crucible. Mistakes were made, overordering some items, understocking others, missing a delivery deadline that cost the company $50,000 and nearly my job. Yet, each error became a lesson. I learned to build in buffer times, cultivate backup supplier relationships, and develop an intuitive sense for impending issues. By year 4, the system ran with a quiet efficiency. I'd renegotiated major contracts, saving the company approximately $800,000 annually. More importantly, I had cultivated personal relationships with key account managers. I knew their kids' names, remembered birthdays, and sent Christmas cards. It might sound sentimental, but in business-to-business relationships, genuine connection matters. People choose to work with those they like and trust. Beyond the formal agreements, I developed a proprietary tracking system that lived largely in my head. It wasn't in any software, it was a blend of spreadsheets, cryptic notes, and invaluable institutional knowledge. I knew which suppliers had recurring quality issues with specific SKUs, which would discreetly extend payment terms during a lean month, and which account managers would answer my call at 7 p.m. on a Saturday in an emergency. This unwritten knowledge, built on years of reading between the lines, understanding internal supplier politics, and knowing when to push or when to concede, was my most valuable asset. It wasn't glamorous, but I was exceptionally good at it. Our costs had decreased by 22% since I began, lead times were optimized, and quality issues had plummeted. The CEO valued me because I consistently enhanced his quarterly reports. The operations team appreciated me because parts consistently arrived on schedule. Even accounting, typically at odds with procurement, tolerated my presence. I had also averted several crises. Once, when our primary steel supplier went bankrupt without warning, I secured a replacement and initiated shipping within 48 hours. Another time, defective bearings threatened a major recall. I worked with the supplier to identify the faulty batch, expedited replacements, and negotiated compensation without involving lawyers, saving the company $500,000 to $1 million in potential liability. I'd expected that to count for something. I was wrong. Gerald, our new VP of Operations, arrived mid-50s, with an MBA and a resume that looked impressive until you scrutinized it. The company he'd left had folded 2 years after his departure, a red flag missed by the board. From his first day, Gerald projected an air of needing to be the smartest person in every room. He'd interject in meetings to correct inconsequential details, transforming a simple delivery estimate into a precise itinerary down to the minute. Midnight emails nitpicking minor issues or demanding reports nobody had ever needed became routine. He wore expensive suits that were laughably out of place in our plant, earning him the nickname the Penguin among the factory floor workers. I'd handled difficult bosses before, so I settled into a routine of compliance, assuming he'd either adjust or move on. Gerald's approach was aggressive micromanagement. He demanded daily updates on supplier communications, copies of every email I sent, and obscure metrics tracked on spreadsheets. He wanted inventory turnover ratios broken down by supplier, aging reports on payables twice a week, and insisted on being CC'd on every purchase order over $1,000. It was irritating, but I complied, believing my competence would eventually win him over. It didn't. Instead, he began questioning my decisions, always implying I could have negotiated a better deal, despite my results speaking for themselves. His gravest flaw was his profound misunderstanding of supplier relationships. He viewed every vendor as an adversary, every negotiation a zero-sum game. When I tried to explain the value of long-term partnerships, priority treatment, flexibility during lean times, he dismissed it as naivete, asserting that business is business and we must maximize shareholder value. We weren't a publicly traded company, and treating suppliers as disposable adversaries was a guaranteed way to land at the bottom of their priority list. 2 months into his tenure, Gerald started dropping into my supplier calls. His first impromptu appearance was with Reynolds Industrial, our largest aluminum supplier. James, their account manager, and I had cultivated a solid 4-year relationship. Our calls were typically cordial check-ins. Gerald, however, transformed it into an interrogation, grilling James about margins, production costs, and demanding lower prices. James remained professional, but I sensed the strain in his voice. After we disconnected, James called me directly. "What was that about?" he asked, clearly unsettled. I apologized, attributing it to a new VP still learning the ropes. James politely requested a heads-up next time. I mentally resolved to shield him from further exposure, but Gerald had other plans. For months into his reign, my annual review arrived. I had consistently exceeded every metric, savings were up, on-time delivery was an industry-leading 96%, and customer complaints about part quality were negligible. I'd saved the company $320,000 annually on the Reynolds aluminum contract alone and found a new packaging supplier that cut costs by 18% while improving quality. My average lead time reduction across all suppliers freed up significant capital tied in inventory. I walked into that review expecting a substantial raise or bonus. My $78,000 salary was below market for someone generating millions in annual savings. Recruiters had already confirmed I was undervalued by $15,000 to $20,000. I loved my job and the company, but I wanted fair compensation. Gerald sat opposite me, his thin smile unwavering, his eyes devoid of warmth. He slid my printed review across the table. Every category was marked meets expectations. Not exceeds. Just meets. I looked up, confused. My performance has been significantly above baseline, I stated, my voice even. Record cost savings, perfect quality, industry-leading delivery. How is that merely meeting expectations? He leaned back, fingers steepled. Those results are what we expect from someone in your role, he replied. You're doing your job. That's good, but it's not exceptional. I've saved the company over $2 million in the past year, I countered, keeping my voice level. That's 4 times my total compensation. How is that not exceptional? He claimed those savings were built into the budget, standard expectations. This was pure gaslighting, I had established those benchmarks. When I brought up the Reynolds contract, he waved a dismissive hand. Any competent procurement manager constantly seeks better terms. That's your job. My jaw tightened, but I held my composure. I understand budget constraints, but I've delivered significant value. I'd like to discuss compensation adjustments. Gerald set his pen down, his thin smile widening. I've been reviewing the budget. Frankly, I don't see room for increases right now. We need to be smart about spending. This from the man who just spent $15,000 remodeling his office with a coffee bar and a supposed cognitive function improving air purifier. With respect, I said, I've exceeded expectations. Comparable positions are paying significantly more. I'm at least $15,000 to $20,000 below market. His smile grew condescending. Online surveys don't account for everything. The stability here, the benefits, work-life balance, your total compensation package is quite good. I clarified that my information came from recruiters and colleagues, not just online surveys. The market is clear. Gerald leaned forward. You're welcome to explore other opportunities if you feel undervalued, but I should tell you, in my experience, people who threaten to leave rarely follow through. And if you did quit, I'd have you replaced by Friday. Procurement isn't exactly rocket science. There it was. The smirk, the casual dismissal, the contempt, the absolute certainty that I was bluffing. I sat for 10 seconds, processing. Then, I slowly nodded. That's good to know. I appreciate your honesty. Glad we understand each other, he said, picking up his pen, a clear sign the meeting was over. Now, I need you to prioritize the Reynolds contract renewal. By end of week. Sure thing, I replied, standing. I returned to my office, closed the door, and opened my laptop. I had emails to write. Emails that had nothing to do with contract renewals. Gerald fundamentally misunderstood procurement. It wasn't merely about ordering goods and negotiating prices, it was about cultivated relationships, deep trust, and institutional knowledge that no manual or database could capture. Our main suppliers weren't just vendors, they were partners I had carefully nurtured for years. I knew who would champion our needs during shortages, which plants could handle rush orders, who to call when issues arose, and precisely how to maintain their satisfaction. Reynolds Industrial, for example. On paper, our aluminum supplier with standard contractual terms. But the true relationship ran deeper. I knew James, their account manager, had 2 kids in college. I knew his boss, Patricia, was nearing retirement and sought a smooth exit. I knew their Indiana plant offered superior quality control to their Kentucky facility, so I always requested material from Indiana, absorbing the slightly higher shipping cost. I also knew that 18 months prior, Reynolds had faced a cash flow crisis due to a major customer delaying payments. James, trusting me, had confided this over dinner. I worked with our accounting team to accelerate some of our payments, a cost-neutral gesture that helped them avert a crisis. 3 months later, when we had an emergency need for aluminum due to a production error, Reynolds moved mountains. They bumped other customers, ran overtime shifts, and absorbed expedite costs, delivering material in 2 days when it normally took 3 weeks. James didn't even ask for premium pricing. That's the kind of relationship built over years of fairness and treating people as partners, not commodities. All of that resided in my head. Gerald believed he could replace that by Friday. I spent the next 2 days acting normal, CCing Gerald on routine emails, attending meetings, while secretly updating my resume and discreetly networking. I kept my job search confidential, avoiding company email and phone. Tuesday night, a recruiter named and, specializing in supply chain roles, confirmed my market value. By Wednesday, I had 2 preliminary interviews scheduled. Thursday morning, a video interview with a competitor. 20 miles away resulted in an immediate job offer, $95,000 base salary, quarterly bonuses tied to cost savings, better benefits, and a professional development budget. Linda, the hiring manager, a procurement veteran, understood and valued my expertise. I accepted, promising to start after a 2-week notice. I drafted my resignation letter, brief, professional, 2 weeks notice effective immediately. No mention of Gerald's comments. I printed it, signed it, and placed it in a folder. At 3 p.m. on Friday, I walked into Gerald's office. He waved me in while on the phone, dominating a conversation he clearly didn't understand. When he hung up, he looked at me with mild annoyance. "What do you need?" "I'm resigning," I said, handing him the folder. "My last day is 2 weeks from today." His face cycled through confusion, annoyance, then a flicker of genuine concern. Finally, the smirk returned. "I appreciate the notice," he said, scanning the letter quickly, "but we don't need 2 weeks. You can clear out your desk today. I'll have someone cover your responsibilities starting Monday." "Perfect," I said with a shrug. "Your call. I'll need to do an exit interview with HR." Gerald was already looking at his computer, dismissing me. "Make sure you leave detailed notes about ongoing projects and supplier contacts." "Sure," I replied, knowing I wouldn't. When an employer accepts a resignation effective immediately, they terminate employment. Any obligation beyond returning company property ceases. Gerald thought he was punishing me; he was actually relieving me of any responsibility for transition. I packed my personal items, a few photos, some decent office supplies I'd bought myself, my alma mater mug, a miraculously surviving plant. I left no detailed notes, no documentation of supplier relationships, no transition plan. Gerald had dismissed my work, micromanaged me for 4 months, and told me I was easily replaceable. He wanted to learn that lesson the hard way. My 2 assistants, Katie and Ben, stopped by as I packed. "Is it true?" Katie asked. "You're leaving today?" "Yep." "Because of Gerald?" I looked at her. She was sharp, mid-20s, and would eventually connect the dots. "I got a better offer," I said. Ben, quieter but equally capable, nodded. "Are they hiring where you're going?" I wrote down Linda's contact information. "If things get weird here, reach out. She's building a team." They thanked me. Katie looked like she wanted to say more, but Ben held her back. They knew the chaos that was coming. I felt for them, good people caught in the fallout of Gerald's ego. On my way out, I saw Rachel in HR, a veteran who genuinely cared about employees. "I'm heading out," I told her. "Gerald said you'd handle the exit paperwork." Her eyebrows rose. "He's accepting your resignation effective immediately?" "Yep." She sighed. "That's not standard protocol. We need proper knowledge transfer, offboarding, exit interviews, but okay, I'll process everything." "Do you have time for an exit interview now?" In a small conference room, Rachel methodically typed my responses. Why was I leaving? Better opportunity, more money, growth prospects. What could the company have done better? Addressed compensation concerns sooner. Would I recommend the company? Depends on the role and the management, I said carefully. She paused. Can you elaborate? The company has good people and solid fundamentals, I explained. But recent management changes have created challenges. I'd recommend it to someone who's a good fit for the current leadership style. She typed that, then looked up. Off the record? Sure. Gerald's going to screw this up, isn't he? I met her eyes. I think Gerald believes procurement is simpler than it actually is. He'll figure it out. Question is how much it'll cost before he does. She nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I pushed back on his decision to let you go immediately. He overruled me. Said he wanted to send a message that nobody's irreplaceable. Well, I said, he's about to find out if that's true. She advised me to document everything about my departure, Gerald's words, the immediate termination, just in case. And Rachel, I added, you might want to update your own resume. I don't think this is going to get better before it gets worse. She gave a sad smile. Already started. We shook hands. I walked out to my car, threw the box in the backseat, feeling lighter than I had in months. The weekend passed quietly. Monday at my new company was orientation, paperwork, meeting the team. The atmosphere was remarkably different, engaged, focused, no one walking on eggshells. Linda, my new boss, spent 2 hours with me. I hired you because you're an expert, she said. I'm not going to micromanage you. You'll have autonomy. Keep me informed on major stuff, but day-to-day, that's your domain. Music to my ears. I spent the week getting oriented, meeting new suppliers, reviewing contracts. Good work without constant interference. I didn't think about my old job until Tuesday afternoon. My phone rang, unknown local number. Hey, it's James from Reynolds Industrial, the voice said. Is this a good time? James, account manager for our largest aluminum supplier, a contract worth roughly $2 million annually. Hey, James, I replied, what's up? I got a weird email from your company yesterday. Someone named Gerald asking to renegotiate our contract terms. Really aggressive. Demanding better pricing and shorter lead times. I almost laughed. I don't work there anymore. Resigned last week. A pause. You're serious? Yeah, new company now. Damn, James said. Who's handling procurement? No idea. Gerald, I guess. He's VP of Operations. Another pause. Well, that explains the tone. Look, I'll be straight with you. We've worked together for 4 years. You've always been fair. This Gerald guy demanded a 15% price cut and a week off lead times. No discussion. He said if we can't meet his terms, he'll find another supplier. Sounds like Gerald, I said. Yeah, well, I told him we can't do that. Our margins are tight. So, I'm calling to give you a heads up, we're probably pulling out of that contract. A cold spike of satisfaction. That's your call, James. For what it's worth, Reynolds has been a great partner. Appreciated working with you. Same here, he said. If you need a supplier at your new company, give me a ring. I'll take care of you. Will do. Thanks for the heads up. I hung up, sitting with the weight of that call. Reynolds pulling out was a massive problem. Replacing them would take weeks, matching our negotiated pricing, nearly impossible. A small part of me felt bad for the people who would deal with the fallout. Then I remembered Gerald's smirk, his arrogant pronouncement. Over the next 3 days, 7 more calls came in. Chris from Tri-State Plastics, our steel supplier, the packaging vendor, all with the same story. Gerald's aggressive emails, demands, threats. Every single one was walking away. I told each the truth, I had left, Gerald was handling procurement, and they should make the decision that best suited their business. Friday afternoon, Rachel called, her voice strained. I need to ask you something off the record. Okay. Did you do anything to sabotage the supplier relationships before you left? No, I said, my voice calm. I resigned, packed my desk, and left. Gerald chose to accept my resignation effective immediately, so I didn't even work my notice period. That's what I thought. I had to ask because Gerald is losing his mind. Every major supplier is either threatening to terminate or has sent cancellation notices. He's claiming you must have poisoned them against the company. I didn't have to, I said. Gerald did that himself. What do you mean? He contacted every supplier, demanding price cuts and better terms. Didn't ask, didn't negotiate, just sent aggressive emails threatening to replace them. Turns out vendors don't respond well to being threatened. Rachel was quiet for a moment. He actually said that? According to multiple suppliers, yes. Jesus, how bad is it? I asked. Bad. Operations is freaking out. Not enough raw materials for next month's production. The CEO is furious. Legal is involved because of penalty clauses for early termination. It's a disaster. Grim satisfaction settled in my chest. That's unfortunate. They're talking about trying to hire you back, she continued, offering more money, whatever you want. Not interested, I said. Look, I'm sorry about how this went down. You deserved better. Thanks, Rachel. I appreciate that. She sighed. Good luck with the new job. You, too. And Rachel, keep updating that resume. This company is going to be bleeding talent for a while. Already on it, she said, and hung up. I thought about Gerald. Had he understood yet? Did he realize that replacing me wasn't the challenge? Replacing 6 years of relationship building and trust was impossible. The following week, LinkedIn messages from former colleagues confirmed the chaos. Gerald had tried to personally manage procurement, and it had gone exactly as expected. Operations ground to a halt, assembly lines sat idle. Deadlines were missed. Customers cancelled orders. The financial hit, between lost revenue, penalty clauses, and emergency sourcing at inflated prices, spiraled into the millions. Gerald tried to blame me, sending a company-wide email accusing me of sabotage. Linda, my new boss, forwarded it. Want me to have our legal team send a cease and desist? She asked. Not necessary, I wrote back. Truth is a defense. Let him dig his own grave. 2 days later, Rachel forwarded another email, this one from the CEO to the entire staff. A masterclass in corporate damage control. It acknowledged communication issues with suppliers following a management transition, outlined steps to rebuild, and buried in the middle was a single line: Gerald Patterson is no longer with the company. Effective immediately. They actually fired him, Linda observed. 6 months and he torched the place. Gerald was very good at burning bridges, I confirmed. A former colleague confirmed the full fallout over coffee. The board had investigated, discovering Gerald had inflated his resume. The Ohio company hadn't just folded after he left, it had suffered partly due to his poor vendor management, the same playbook he'd tried here. He'd also cherry-picked data, misleading the CEO. Gerald, attempting to negotiate severance, was met with his contract's morality clause: gross negligence voided it. He walked away with nothing. 3 more people have left since you did, my colleague said. The company hired a crisis firm, but it wasn't going well. Danielle, promoted to interim procurement manager, was overwhelmed. Tell her she can call me if she needs advice, I said. Off the record. We finished our coffee. Sometimes the best revenge is simply stepping aside and letting someone destroy themselves. 3 months later, an email arrived from my old company's CEO. Carefully worded, professional, but the desperation was palpable. He apologized for my departure, acknowledged serious mistakes in management, and asked if I'd consider returning. The offer was generous: $110,000 base salary, profit sharing, a signing bonus for lost unvested benefits, a guaranteed seat in management meetings, everything I'd wanted before Gerald arrived. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Linda with the subject line, "FY, not taking this." She responded, "Good. We like having you here." I politely declined the CEO's offer, explaining my happiness in my current role. He replied within the hour, asking if I'd consult. I considered it for perhaps 30 seconds. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not available. However, I'd recommend reaching out to James at Reynolds Industrial and Chris at Tri-State Plastics. They're both professional and fair. If your new procurement manager approaches them with respect instead of demands, they might be willing to restart conversations. Good luck. I never heard back. Life moved on. I settled into my new role, built new supplier relationships, implemented ideas I'd never gotten to try, and earned a promotion after 8 months. My old company limped along. They eventually stabilized, but the damage was permanent. Revenue was down, market share eroded, and several longtime customers had switched to competitors during the supply chain chaos, never to return. Last I heard, they were considering selling to a larger firm. The CEO who'd emailed me had retired early. The board had cleaned house. All because Gerald thought procurement wasn't rocket science. 6 months after I left, Katie reached out. She'd taken my advice and was hired as a buyer on Linda's team. "It's so different here," she said over lunch. "People actually communicate. Management listens." I forgot what it felt like to not be stressed all the time. "What happened to Ben?" I asked. "He left 2 months after you did. Got a job in logistics. Better pay, better hours." "And the old place?" Katie shook her head. "They hired someone to replace you. Some guy from a consulting firm. He lasted 3 months. Then another person who's trying to rebuild everything from scratch. But the damage is done. Half the suppliers won't work with them. The ones who stayed jacked up their prices because they know the company's desperate." "What about operations?" I pressed. "Revenue's down 30%. They laid off about 60 people in manufacturing. The CEO announced his retirement last month. Word is they're shopping the company around." I nodded, not surprised but still sobered by the extent of the fallout. Was the true cost of arrogance ever fully paid?